Hello everyone, and welcome to the Commander's Forge. I am Andrew Bentley, and I am your host. Now, the Commander's Forge is an area for me to talk about magic and Commander in the ways that I enjoy it. Now, today, I want to take a little dive into different philosophies behind building decks. And I kind of want to start that with a quick story. Back when Battle Bond came out and Najeela the Blade Blossom was first shown, I immediately wanted to build that deck. I wanted to build it as an aggro deck and just decimate people at the table. My friend Mac saw Najeela and wanted to build a combo deck. And my cousin Nate saw Najeela and wanted to build a control deck. Each had their own reasons. Nate wanted to build a control deck using Najeela's ability to gum up the board. And our friend Mac wanted to take her ability to untap and then take infinite combats. So the three of us set a date. We each built the deck we wanted. And we sat down to play. Najeela against Najeela against Najeela. And I decimated the table because I was playing pure aggro and I overran the board before they could do anything. But I was thinking, I recently built Finn the Fang Bearer. And originally I had seen Andy Flory's version of Finn. And I thought, oh, that's cool, but I don't want to do proliferate. So a lot of our Death Touchers are the same, like that side of the deck is the same. But where he leans into proliferate, I lean into +1/+1 counters and protection. And I'll get into that in a little bit because I'm going to talk about my Finn deck in the second half of the show. But it really brings you to see, especially among brewers, how the same deck can be so different. How I can take one idea and somebody can take a completely opposite stance. And that's part of what I love about Commander. It doesn't have to all be the same deck. And maybe that's where I get most of my deck building quirks. I don't generally optimize all of my decks. I like to think that when I sit down to play against people that I'm just playing for a fun game. 9 times out of 10, I don't even necessarily care if I win. And that mentality is how I end up with decks like Linden, where it's just a very aggressive white deck to show people that white decks can stand with some of the best decks in the format. Or Colligan, where, yes, it's Dragon Tribal, and it just wants to cheat out big expensive dragons and turn them sideways. Or Yumori. Who looks at Yumori and says, yeah, I can build a Planeswalker deck around that? Me. That's what I do. And sure, I like my run-of-the-mill tribal decks. But not all of my decks are tribal. Again, Yumori is a Planeswalker control deck. Linden, while it has a concentration of humans, is not technically a tribal deck. I hold myself to a very high standard when I make a tribal deck. And that is to say that almost all of my creatures, if not all of my creatures, have to fit into that type. Let's take elves. I have my elf deck. I forget offhand how many creatures are in it. There's exactly one non-elf creature in that. And it's the honorary elf, Craterhoof Behemoth. But that's it. Let's take my Goblin deck. It's running the not-so-great version of Krenko as the commander, and the only creature in there that isn't a goblin is, again, the honorary goblin, Perforos, God of the Forge. And I'm not necessarily saying, like, I'm the most unique brewer out there. Like, sure, I'll check EDH Rec every once in a while just to get a general idea of what other people are playing. I would rather sit down at my desk, pull out one of the random boxes of Magic cards I have sitting around, look through it and go, I could do something with that. I really do enjoy the different aspects that this game brings. Who knows? Maybe that's why I played, Legacy and Standard and Modern at one point. They were all so different. But now I play pretty much Commander. And Draft occasionally, but with the pandemic, that hasn't happened in, a year. Alright, with that, we're going to kick it to an ad, and then when we get back, we're going to talk about some Mono Green Deathtouch.
Hi, if you haven't heard about Anchor, let me tell you some of the reasons why I started using it. For one, it's free. There's no subscription fee. You don't have to pay for anything. Second, it gives you all of the editing software you need for everything you're going to do. Beyond that, it helps distribute your podcasts to so many different places, including Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. It's amazing. Not only that, but they offer to sponsor you. Right there. That's it. Just by recording podcasts, they will pay you based on the number of listens it gets. It brings everything you need into one place. And if you want to try it out, you can download their app, or you can go to anchor.fm to get started. Now back to the episode.
Alright, welcome back. Now let's talk about my version of Finn the Fangbearer. Finn is a 1/3 human warrior for 1 and a green. He has Deathtouch, and he says whenever a creature you control with Deathtouch deals combat damage to a player, that player gets 2 poison counters. And a player with 10 poison counters loses the game. So obviously the name of the game is to hit people with Deathtouch creatures. So we're jamming a bunch of them. Now the funny thing about a lot of these Deathtouch creatures that I'm running is there a bunch of commons and uncommons. There's a few rares and a few mythics, but for the most part, you get stuff like Moss Viper. It's a 1/1 snake with Deathtouch for a single green mana. Or Narum Renegade. It's a 1/2 elf warrior with Deathtouch for a single green mana with Revolt. It says, when he enters the battlefield, he comes with a +1/+1 counter if a permanent you controlled left the battlefield this turn. So, yeah. Or Heir of the Wilds. It's a 2/2 human warrior with Deathtouch for 1 and a green with Ferocious. Whenever he attacks, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, he gets +1/+1 till end of turn. Or I have 2 Deathtouchers that are 2 mana that have Reach and Deathtouch. The first one is Deadly Recluse. It's a 1/2 with Reach Deathtouch, and it costs 1 and a green. And the other one is Thornwheeled Archer, which is a 2/1 with Reach and Deathtouch for 1 and a green. And I've seen the Deadly Recluse hold off dragons. Yeah, dragons. But some of our not common and uncommon ones fall in the range of stuff like Questing Beast. It's a 4/4 beast for 2 green that has Vigilance, Deathtouch, and Haste. Can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. Combat damage that will be dealt by creatures you control can't be prevented. And whenever Questing Beast deals combat damage to an opponent, it deals that much damage to target planeswalker that player controls. And this is a mythic from Throne of Eldraine. Or Ronas the Indomitable. He's a 5/5 god. He has Deathtouch and Indestructible. He can't attack or block unless you control another creature with power 4 or greater. And for 2 and a green, another target creature gets +2/+0 and gains trample till end of turn. For 2 and a green. I actually included him not necessarily because he has Deathtouch, but because he can give other Deathtouchers trample. Or we have his more dead version with God Eternal Ronas. He's a 5/5 zombie god for 3 green with Deathtouch. And when he enters the battlefield, you double the power of each other creature you control till end of turn. Those creatures gain vigilance until end of turn. And then when he dies or is put into exile from the battlefield, you can put it into your library third from the top. And I think one of the best Deathtouchers we have is rare. It's Hornet Queen. It's a 2/2 flying, death-touching insect for 4 green. But when Hornet Queen enters the battlefield, you put 4 1/1 green insect creature tokens with flying and death touch onto the battlefield. So yes, you are paying 7 mana for a 2/2. But you are paying 7 mana for 6 power worth of death touch spread out over 5 creatures. Yeah. All in all, the Death Touchers is a big part of it. But we're not just running Death Touchers. Because like I said, we kind of have this sub-theme in my deck that is +1/+1 counters. And that starts with Ivy Lane Denizen. It's a 2/3 elf warrior for 3 and a green. And whenever another green creature enters the battlefield under your control, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. So you can choose where to throw the counter. Or we take our Loyal Guardian, which is a 4/4 rhino for 4 and a green with trample that says, at the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control your commander, you put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Gotta love that each part. That threw people for a loop in a game the other day. This side of the deck came about because I pulled a Vorinclex Monstrous Raider. It's a 6/6 Phyrexian Praetor for 4 green with trample and haste. But if you would put 1 or more counters on a permanent you control, you put twice that many of each of those kinds of counters on that permanent or player instead. And if an opponent would put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, they put half that many of each of those counters on that permanent or player instead, rounded down. That's an important part of that ability, rounded down. That means if they try to put 1 counter, they get 0 counters. That's what we call powerful magic. And there's a suite of other creatures in the deck. And again, it's mono green, so we've got our ramp package. But one of the things I wanted to be able to do with Deathtouchers is throw them at people. And I do that with stuff like Prey Upon, Rabid Bite, and Nature's Way. So Prey Upon is just a good old green for a sorcery that says target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. Ours has Deathtouch, so theirs will die regardless. Rabid Bite is a 1 in a green for a sorcery. And this one's slightly different because it says target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. So instead of a fight, it just kind of bites. And then Nature's Way is target creature you control gains vigilance and trample till end of turn for 1 in a green. And it deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. So again, there's more of this that you'll see in the full deck list. So far it's been a lot of fun to run. But something I've noticed is people get scared of Deathtouchers, and they will try to kill them. So I have this suite of single mana spells to help protect us. And that starts with Blossoming Defense, which is a single green for an instant that says target creature you control gets +2/+2 and gains hexproof till end of turn. So that is protection, but we can also sometimes just say, well, you're almost dead, so I'll pump it and go on. Next we have Hapatra's Mark. It's a single green mana for an instant that says target creature you control gains hexproof till end of turn. Remove all -1/-1 counters from it. The second part of that might not come up very often, but it's the hexproof that we care about. Snakeskin Veil plays into both sides. It's a single green mana for an instant that says put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control, and it gains hexproof till end of turn. Or there's Ranger's Guile. Single green mana for an instant. Target creature you control gets +1/+1 and gains hexproof till end of turn. And then Vines of Vastwood. Single green mana, kicker for a green mana. Target creature can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control this turn. Hexproof. If Vines of Vastwood was kicked, that creature gets +4/+4 till end of turn. So, in short, we want to play small creatures, turn them sideways, protect them, and bring them back sometimes, but that's for another day. That said, if you're watching this on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. If you liked it, hit that like button. And, hit that bell for notifications. Now, if you want to support the podcast, you can go to patreon.com/CommandersForge, and that is CMDR_Forge. And yeah, I think with that, I will see you next time. That brings us to the end of the podcast. I would like to thank Nate and Erica Jacobs for designing my logo, and Cody Mulpey and Ian Foss for allowing me to use a sample of music from their band, The Crypt. The podcast can be found on YouTube by searching Commander's Forge. The podcast is Commander's Forge, that is CMDR_Forge on Twitter. I can be found on Twitter at BentzMr, that is BENTZMR. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next time, and until then, here's to fun games and sick plays.